Tarek Van had always believed the universe was full of calm and wisdom. His people, the Sithari, were scholars and thinkers. They studied life across the stars, not to control it, but to understand it. For centuries, they had watched countless species grow, fight, and fade. To them, war was a thing of the past, a primitive part of evolution that advanced minds had outgrown. When he was chosen to join the Galactic Observation Corps, Tarek Van thought it would be peaceful work. He imagined watching the rise of new civilizations and writing reports about their cultures. But when he received his new assignment, he hesitated. His next subject was a young, unpredictable race known as humans, inhabitants of a small blue planet called Earth. At first, he felt disappointed. "Humans?" he murmured, reading the mission order. "A species only a few thousand years into space travel? What could they possibly teach us?" But his mentor, an old Sithari historian named Relin Kaur, only smiled. "Do not underestimate them," he said. "Humans are different. They learn quickly. They feel deeply. And when they decide to fight, even the stars seem to tremble." Tarek Van didn't understand those words at the time. He thought they were just a scholar's exaggeration. That was before he saw the humans with his own eyes. Tarek Van arrived on the orbital station Aurora 9, where humans worked side by side with aliens. The place was alive with noise and movement. Humans laughed loudly, argued passionately, and walked with purpose. They were always busy, always doing something. He observed them closely. Their bodies were fragile compared to many species: soft skin, light bones, limited strength. Yet they moved with confidence, as if weakness didn't exist for them. He noticed how they spoke to each other. Even in disagreement, they joked and smiled. When they failed, they tried again. When they succeeded, they celebrated as a group. To a Sithari, such behavior seemed chaotic, even childish. One day, Tarek Van recorded in his report, "Humans are emotional creatures. Their actions often lack logic. However, they seem to possess a strange power, an energy that grows stronger in difficulty. Perhaps it is what they call hope." But his calm observation ended when the galaxy changed overnight. It began with a transmission from deep space. The Dravkesh, a warlike insectoid species, had returned. Long ago they were thought extinct after losing to the Galactic Union. But now they were back, with larger fleets and deadlier weapons. Their message was simple and terrifying. The stars belong to the strong. The weak will be consumed. Within days, entire colonies fell. Planets burned. Many Union races panicked. Some fled. Others surrendered before the enemy even arrived. The once united council was breaking apart. But the humans didn't run. The human colonies at the edge of the galaxy were the first to face the Dravkesh. Reports came of battles where small human fleets held off massive invasions for days. Their casualty numbers were shocking, but so was their resistance. Tarek Van couldn't believe it. "Why do they keep fighting?" he asked during a council meeting. "Their losses are beyond reason." A human officer in the room, Captain Elena Torres, turned to him. Her eyes were sharp and proud. "Because it's our home," she said simply. "We don't give up home." That answer confused him. Home? Was it really worth such pain? To the Sithari, survival was logic. If a war was unwinnable, retreat was wisdom. But humans chose to fight even when hope seemed gone. Tarek Van was soon assigned to accompany Captain Torres aboard the USS Valiant, a human battlecruiser preparing for war. His job was to observe human behavior during combat for the Galactic Union's study. The Valiant was different from any ship he had ever been on. It was not quiet like Sithari vessels. It was alive with sound. Metal boots echoing, voices shouting, alarms humming, engines roaring. Yet within the chaos there was order. Everyone knew their duty. Everyone trusted their captain. Tarek Van walked through the corridors watching the humans prepare. Some were engineers, some were soldiers, but all shared the same determined energy. He saw one mechanic painting a small picture of his family on the wall near his bunk. Another soldier kissed a pendant and whispered a prayer before loading her weapon. "Do they not fear death?" Tarek Ven asked Captain Torres. The captain smiled sadly. "Of course we do. Fear reminds us what we stand to lose. But courage is what makes us move anyway." That night, Tarek Ven couldn't sleep. He watched Earth from the observation deck, a small blue jewel shining in the dark. It was beautiful and fragile. He began to understand why humans fought for it. When the Valiant finally reached the front lines, the war was raging. The Druvkesh fleet was enormous, black ships that moved like living shadows. They had already destroyed 2 colonies. Now they were heading for Epsilon Prime, a human world rich with life. The Valiant joined a defense force of 20 ships. The humans were outnumbered 5-1. The Union observers advised retreat, but Captain Torres refused. "We hold the line," she said firmly. "If Epsilon falls, millions die. If we stand, maybe they live." Her words echoed through the ship. The crew didn't argue. They simply moved faster. The battle began at dawn. Plasma beams tore across space. Explosions lit up the void like dying stars. The Valiant shook as enemy fire struck its shields. Tarek Ven clung to a railing, terrified. He had seen battles before, but nothing like this. The humans fought like fire itself, fast, fierce, and fearless. When one ship went down, another moved forward to fill the gap. When communications failed, they used light signals. When weapons jammed, they fixed them mid-battle. He saw a smaller ship, the Andromeda's Pride, crippled and burning. Instead of retreating, its commander turned toward the largest Druvkesh cruiser. Over the comms, the humans heard his final words. "Tell my kids, we kept them safe." Then the Andromeda's Pride rammed straight into the enemy ship. Both exploded in a blinding flash. Silence filled the bridge for a moment, then cheers erupted. The sacrifice had broken the enemy line. Tarek Ven was speechless. He didn't know whether to call it bravery or madness. Hours passed. The Valiant was badly damaged, but still fighting. Captain Torres stood at the command station, calm even as sparks flew around her. "Keep firing," she ordered. "No one quits today." When the Druvkesh finally retreated, the battlefield was a graveyard of wrecks and smoke. Out of 20 human ships, only 7 remained. But they had saved the planet. Tarek Ven looked out at the burning stars, his chest tight with emotions he couldn't name. Fear, respect, sorrow, all mixed into one. He turned to Captain Torres. "You won, but at such a cost. Was it worth it?" She looked at him quietly for a long moment. "Ask the people on Epsilon Prime," she said. "Ask the children who will wake up tomorrow because someone stayed behind." Tarek Ven said nothing. He couldn't. Later, in his quarters, he began to write his report. His hands trembled slightly as he typed, "Humanity is unlike any race I have observed. Their strength is not physical but emotional. Their fury is not wild, it is focused. They fight not to destroy but to protect. When their world burns, they do not flee. They rise." He paused, thinking of the man on the Andromeda's Pride, of the soldiers smiling even when facing death, and of Captain Torres standing firm among chaos. For the first time in his life, Tarek Ven questioned everything he had believed about war, courage, and peace. He looked out the viewport again, at the distant Earth, glowing softly against the black, and he whispered, "Maybe we were wrong about them." Days passed since the first great battle, but the sound of it still echoed in Tarek Ven's mind. The thunder of explosions, the trembling of the ship, and the cries of victory mixed with sorrow. He couldn't forget the human ship Andromeda's Pride and the voice of its commander before the end. Those words had carved themselves into his memory. "Tell my kids, we kept them safe." Even now, when he looked out at the stars, he could still see the burning wrecks floating in space. To him, they were not ruins of defeat. They were symbols of something larger, something he was just beginning to understand. The Valiant had survived, though damaged heavily. Its hull was scarred, its systems half-broken, and its crew exhausted. But the humans didn't stop to rest. They repaired the ship like they were healing a living being. They welded metal plates, replaced wires, patched holes, and kept moving forward. Tarek Ven watched in silence as engineers worked for long hours, their hands burned and tired. Yet no one complained. When he asked one of them, a young woman named Chief Riley, why they pushed themselves so hard, she laughed and said, "Because we have to. The next battle won't wait for us to feel sorry." Her tone wasn't bitter, it was proud. The Galactic Union was falling apart faster than anyone had expected. News came every day of worlds surrendering or being destroyed. The Dravkesh advanced like a storm, leaving nothing alive in their path. The Union Council sent orders for all fleets to regroup and defend only key worlds. That meant hundreds of smaller colonies were left undefended. The Sithari, Tarek Ven's own people, voted to pull back their ships. "It is logical," said one of the ambassadors. "We must save our own before helping others." But humans didn't agree. Captain Torres slammed her hand on the council table during a meeting. Her voice was steady but fierce. "Logic won't stop the Dravkesh," she said. "If we abandon others now, they'll be stronger tomorrow. We need to fight together or we'll fall apart one by one." Tarek Ven sat quietly behind her, watching the room. The other species avoided her gaze. The humans, few in number, stood with her. Their faces showed no fear. When the meeting ended, most fleets withdrew anyway. The humans stayed. They sent transmissions to any world still resisting. "Hold your ground. Humanity is coming." Soon after, the Valiant was repaired and ready for battle once again. But this time, the mission was far more dangerous. Their new target was Doron 9, a mining planet on the edge of Union space. The Dravkesh had captured it a week earlier and were using it as a forward base. If the humans could take it back, they could slow the enemy's advance. But if they failed, the enemy would gain control of 3 more trade routes. Tarek Ven couldn't believe the plan when he heard it. The Valiant and 2 smaller ships were going alone, against a fleet of 10 Dravkesh destroyers. He approached Captain Torres in her ready room before launch. "Captain," he said cautiously, "this mission seems impossible." "The odds." She looked up from her datapad and smiled faintly. "I know the odds, Tarek Ven. But tell me something. If we don't go, who will?" He hesitated. "Perhaps no one." "Exactly," she said, standing. "And that's why we must." There was no arrogance in her tone, no reckless pride, only quiet determination. The ship departed at dawn. The crew stood at their stations, faces calm and focused. Over the intercom, Captain Torres spoke. "Crew of the Valiant, today we fight for more than victory. We fight so that others have a tomorrow. Remember who we are. We are human and we don't back down." The crew cheered. The sound filled the corridors, spreading through the ship like electricity. Tarek Ven felt it deep inside, a warmth he couldn't explain. He had never heard soldiers shout with such life before a battle. On Scythar, they would meditate for calm. The humans, however, filled themselves with energy and emotion, as if the fire inside them needed to be released before facing death. When they arrived near Doron 9, the planet looked like a dying ember. Smoke and fire covered its surface. The Dravkesh ships orbited above like vultures circling a corpse. "Multiple enemy contacts detected," reported the helmsman. Torres stood at the center of the bridge, eyes cold and steady. "Then let's remind them what happens when they touch human soil." The battle began instantly. The Valiant charged forward, its cannons glowing bright blue. The smaller escort ships followed close behind, weaving between enemy fire. The sky lit up with explosions. Tarek Ven held onto his seat, his heart racing. He wasn't used to this kind of warfare, fast, brutal, and desperate. Yet the humans seemed to thrive in it. Every time the enemy changed tactics, Torres adjusted faster. Every time a system failed, someone fixed it within minutes. At one point, a direct hit knocked out the Valiant's shields. Sparks rained down from the ceiling. "Shields offline," shouted an officer. "Then hit them harder," Torres commanded. The ship's main cannon fired again, striking a Dravkesh destroyer dead center. The alien vessel exploded, scattering debris across the stars. Tarek Ven stared in disbelief. Humans fought like they had nothing to lose, and yet it was clear they fought because they had everything to protect. After hours of combat, the humans began their descent toward the planet's surface. The Valiant hovered in low orbit, providing support fire while dropships descended into the burning atmosphere. Tarek Ven watched through the viewing window as hundreds of human Marines entered the battlefield below. They moved in coordinated lines, advancing through ash and smoke. The Dravkesh were stronger physically, but the humans fought with unity. When one fell, two others covered the space. Through his headset, Tarek Ven heard the voice of Private Mason, a Marine he had spoken to days earlier. "This is Mason, Ground Team 6. We've reached the mining sector. Heavy resistance, but we're pushing through. Tell the captain we're not backing down." Even through the static and explosions, Tarek Ven could hear the smile in Mason's voice. Hours later, the communication line crackled again. "Ground forces have secured the surface. The humans had won." When the dust settled, Tarek Ven walked through the battlefield for the first time. He wore a breathing mask, stepping carefully through ruins. The air smelled of smoke and metal. Human soldiers were helping the wounded, both their own and the alien workers who had survived. He saw medics tending to a Sithari miner, offering water and bandages. He turned to one of the soldiers and asked, "Why help them?" "They are not your kind," the soldier smiled, "because suffering doesn't care what kind you are." Those words hit Tarek Ven harder than he expected. That night, back aboard the Valiant, the crew gathered in the hangar. Music played softly through the speakers. Despite their exhaustion, they shared laughter, stories, and food. Some cried quietly for those who didn't return. Others simply sat together, staring at the stars. Tarek Ven sat alone at a corner table watching them. He realized something strange. Humans never faced pain alone. Even in grief, they stayed connected. They carried each other through darkness. Captain Torres approached him. "You look thoughtful," she said. "I am," he replied honestly. "I watched your people fight today. You suffered great losses, yet..." "You smile," she nodded. "That's what keeps us going. We cry, we laugh, we remember, and then we rise again. That's who we are." Tarek Ven looked at her, truly seeing her for the first time. He realized what made humans so powerful wasn't their weapons or ships. It was their hearts. Their spirit refused to break. Later, he recorded in his log, "Humans are a paradox. They fear death, yet face it willingly. They grieve, yet never lose hope. I begin to see why the old scholars said the stars tremble when humans fight. Their fury is not blind rage. It is their love for life turned into strength." He stared at the stars outside his window, the same stars that had witnessed endless wars. Yet now, for the first time, he wondered if peace was truly possible, if perhaps someday, the fire that humans carried could light the galaxy, not with destruction, but with courage and unity. He didn't know it yet, but his heart had already changed, and far beyond the darkness the Dravkesh were regrouping. The next battle would be even greater, but Tarek Ven knew one thing for sure now. When humanity fought, the universe took notice. The war spread like fire across the stars. No one could stop it. The Dravkesh moved with terrible speed, their fleets darkening the skies of every world they reached. Dozens of planets had already fallen. The Galactic Union was losing hope, but one thing began to change everything. Everywhere the Dravkesh went, they now found humans waiting for them. It started with a rumor, a whisper across the communication lines. "The humans are coming." At first, the words brought only confusion. Then they brought courage. Entire planets that had surrendered before now began to resist again. If humans could stand against the Dravkesh, then maybe others could too. Tarek Ven watched this transformation unfold. From the bridge of the USS Valiant, he saw reports from across the Union. Human ships were small, their fleets fewer, yet they won battles no one thought possible. They defended allies who had once mocked them. They risked everything for worlds that weren't even their own. It was no longer just a war. It was a movement. Tarek Ven had been aboard the Valiant for months now, and something inside him had changed. The calm, logical scholar who once observed life from a distance was gone. He no longer saw humans as reckless or strange. He saw them as something new, something powerful. He often sat with Private Mason, the young Marine he had met during the Doron 9 mission. Mason had a warm grin and a quiet strength that always surprised Tarek Ven. One evening, while they shared a simple meal in the mess hall, Tarek Ven asked, "Why do your people fight so hard? Even when hope is small?" Mason thought for a moment, chewing slowly before answering. "Because hope is like fire. It only takes one spark to light the dark, And someone has to be that spark. Tarek Venn tilted his head. And what if the spark dies? Mason smiled faintly. Then another takes its place. Those words stayed in Tarek Venn's heart. He wrote them down in his notes later that night. Humans, he realized, did not fight because they wanted war. They fought because they refused to let darkness win. Weeks later, the Valiant received new orders from the Union. A massive battle was coming. The siege of Viridian Prime, a world rich in resources and home to billions. If it fell, the Union would lose its main supply route, and the war might end in total defeat. The humans were assigned to lead the defense. When Tarek Venn heard this, he was shocked. Lead the defense? Against the entire Dravkesh fleet? Captain Torres only nodded. Someone has to hold the line. The Union's leaders trust us. Tarek Venn knew the truth. Many didn't trust humanity. They were simply desperate. Still, the humans accepted the task without hesitation. The Valiant joined a coalition fleet of many species. But morale was low. Alien commanders spoke quietly among themselves, doubtful of victory. Tarek Venn watched as Captain Torres gathered the leaders in the main chamber. She stood before them calm and strong. "I know you're afraid," she said. "I am too. But fear means you still care. And if you care, then you fight." She looked at each of them. "The Dravkesh think we'll break. Let's prove them wrong." Her voice carried the same quiet fire that always inspired her crew. By the time she finished, the room was silent. Not with fear, but with resolve. Even the alien commanders who doubted her before now stood taller. The battle began 2 days later. The Dravkesh fleet appeared like a dark wall, stretching across space. Their ships blocked out the stars. The humans and their allies prepared for what seemed like certain defeat. Tarek Venn stood on the bridge as alarms sounded. He could feel the vibration of the engines beneath his feet. The air was thick with tension. "Enemy fleet approaching fast," shouted the officer. "Hold position," Captain Torres ordered. Her voice didn't waver. Moments later, space exploded into chaos. Energy beams flashed. Missiles streaked between ships. Shields flared bright blue. The sound of distant explosions filled the ship. Tarek Venn clutched his console, eyes wide. "There too many?" he whispered, but the humans didn't panic. They moved with precision, calling out orders, adjusting coordinates, covering each other like a living machine. One ship was hit, spinning out of control. Another immediately moved to shield it. A damaged cruiser, the Iron Star, rammed into an enemy vessel to block its attack. It was madness and brilliance. Hours passed. The sky above Viridian Prime was filled with fire and smoke. The Valiant's shields flickered. Parts of the ship were damaged, but the humans refused to stop fighting. Captain Torres's voice rang through the ship. "We hold until they break. Remember why we fight. Our families, our homes, our future." Every crew member answered with a single shout, "For humanity." The words sent chills down Tarek Venn's spine. He had never heard such unity before. Even among his own people there was always hesitation. Here there was none. Then came a turning point. A massive Dravkesh warship appeared from hyperspace, a dreadnought twice the size of any human ship. Its weapons could destroy the Valiant with one strike. Panic spread through the Allied ships. Many started to retreat, but the humans didn't. Captain Torres looked at the screen and said quietly, "Target the dreadnought." "Captain," Tarek Venn said, his voice shaking. "That's suicide." She glanced at him, her eyes calm. "Maybe, but if we take it down, we give everyone else a chance." She turned to her crew. "All power to engines. Bring us in close." The Valiant surged forward. Tarek Venn's stomach twisted as they raced toward the giant enemy ship. Laser fire blazed around them. Shields cracked. "Fire all weapons," Torres shouted. The Valiant's cannons roared. The dreadnought returned fire, shaking the entire ship. Systems failed one after another. Sparks flew. Alarms screamed. Still, they didn't stop. At last, a critical hit struck the dreadnought's power core. It began to explode from within. The humans had done it, but at a cost. The Valiant was badly damaged, drifting helplessly as debris filled space. Tarek Venn coughed as smoke filled the air. He looked around at the crew, still at their posts. Some were injured, but none left their stations. On the screen, the Allied ships saw the dreadnought burning. A wave of courage spread across the comm channels. Alien captains who had been retreating turned back. The fleet reorganized. They attacked with new strength. The humans had reignited the will to fight. By the end of the day, the Dravkesh fleet began to fall back. For the first time since the war began, the Union had won a major victory. When silence finally returned, the crew of the Valiant cheered weakly. Some cried, some just sat in disbelief. Tarek Ven stared at the stars outside. "You did it," he said softly. Captain Torres smiled, leaning against the console. "We did it. Every ship out there. Every person who refused to give up." Tarek Ven shook his head slowly. "You humans, you are impossible to understand," she chuckled. "That's okay. Sometimes we don't understand ourselves either." They both looked out at the glowing planet below, Viridian Prime, saved but scarred. Later, in his quarters, Tarek Ven recorded his thoughts. Humans have turned the tide of war not through power but through will. Their courage spreads like light, awakening strength in others. Their fury burns not for conquest but for protection. I see now why their enemies fear them and why their allies follow them. He paused, remembering Mason's words. Hope is like fire. He finally understood. Humanity's battle fury wasn't blind rage. It was the flame of hope that refused to die, even when everything else did. The next morning, Tarek Ven walked through the ship's medbay. He saw wounded humans smiling at each other, sharing jokes even as they recovered. He saw engineers rebuilding what was broken. He saw unity where other species would have found despair. He realized that the humans were teaching him something far beyond warfare. They were showing him what it meant to be alive, to stand tall even when afraid, to care even in pain, and to keep fighting for something greater than yourself. And as he stood there watching them work, Tarek Ven knew his life would never be the same again, because he had seen humanity's fury, and it had changed him forever. The galaxy had never seen such darkness. The Dravkesh Empire, a swarm of living machines and monsters, moved like a storm across the stars. Entire civilizations vanished in silence. Even the oldest and strongest races of the Galactic Union had fallen back. Worlds that once glowed with light were now empty shadows. And yet, one voice still rose through the chaos. That voice belonged to humanity. Commander. Elena Torres stood on the bridge of the USS Valiant. Her eyes locked on the enemy armada that filled the view screen. Her ship was damaged. Her fleet was outnumbered 5-1, and the enemy's flagship looked large enough to block a moon. But there was no fear in her face. There was only resolve. Beside her stood Tarek Ven, the Sithari scholar who had once come to study humans. Now he found himself standing among them, watching a species that refused to kneel even when defeat seemed certain. The humans had named their final mission Operation Dawnfire. It was not a retreat, it was a promise. The command center hummed with energy. Officers rushed between consoles calling out data. The ship trembled as plasma waves brushed its shields. Outside, the human fleet formed into a tight formation, small ships protecting the large, every vessel moving with sharp coordination. Dravkesh fleet closing in. "Commander," reported Lieutenant Chen. "They'll be in range in 30 seconds. Torres nodded calmly. "Then we'll be ready in 20. Her voice was firm and clear. Around her, the crew moved faster, their fear replaced by determination. Tarek Ven watched quietly. He could feel the energy in the air like thunder before a storm. "Commander," he said carefully, "you understand the odds. The enemy has 5 times your firepower. If you fall here, humanity may never recover." Elena turned to him, a small smile on her lips. "Then we make sure this place becomes a memory that the galaxy never forgets." Her words struck Tarek Ven deeply. There was no pride or anger in them, only calm certainty. When the first wave of the Dravkesh arrived, space itself seemed to scream. Green light filled the void as the enemy opened fire. Energy blasts tore through the shields of the frontline frigates. 2 human ships exploded, turning into burning fragments. But before Tarek Ven could even speak, human fighters were already returning fire. Dozens of small ships, agile and fierce, darted through the enemy lines like wasps. They released plasma torpedoes that struck true, tearing apart the outer layers of the Dravkesh warships. The USS Horizon, one of the human destroyers, moved to intercept an enemy carrier. Its captain, a young woman named Aisha Patel, gave a final message through the comms. "If they want our world, they'll have to take it from our ashes." Then her ship rammed straight into the Dravkesh carrier, breaking it in two. The explosion was so bright that it turned night into day. Tarek Ven's heart pounded as he watched. He had studied war before, but he had never seen this kind of bravery. Humans didn't fight for glory. They fought because they refused to lose hope. Hours passed and the battle grew worse. Half of the human fleet was gone. Many of the remaining ships were damaged, engines burning. The Union allies, Sithari, Varnock, and Kirin, watched in disbelief as humanity continued the fight alone. "Commander, the Aegis just went down," a voice cried. Torres clenched her jaw. "All ships maintain formation." The line holds. The line held. Somehow, impossibly, it held. Every time an enemy ship destroyed one human vessel, another moved forward to fill the space. When the communications link broke down, captains began sending coded flashes of light to coordinate their moves. Even with broken systems and fading weapons, they fought with precision and heart. On the main screen, Tarek Ven saw the enemy flagship turning toward them. It was a monstrous craft covered in spikes and organic armor. "They're targeting us," he whispered. "Good," Torres replied. "Then we've got their attention." "Status of the Dawnfire system?" she asked. Lieutenant Chen hesitated. "It's untested. If we use it now," Torres cut him off. "If we don't, there won't be a later." The Dawnfire system was humanity's last invention, a massive energy pulse that used the ship's core to create a solar, flare-like blast. It could destroy the enemy flagship, but it would also burn out their own engines completely. Tarek Ven stared at her in shock. "You would risk your life for this?" Torres smiled softly. "Not just my life. Our future." She turned toward the communications officer. "Open all channels." A moment later, her voice echoed through every ship in the fleet and through the Allied channels as well. "To every soldier out there, human or not, this is our stand. The Dravkesh believe they can erase us, but we are the light that refuses to die. We are the voice that will be remembered when the stars fade. Today we show them what it means to be alive." The bridge went silent. Then one by one, the Allied ships began to move forward. The Sithari fleet, who had once sworn to never fight again. The war was finally over. The great fleets that once filled the skies were now silent. The stars that had burned with explosions and fire now shone quietly again. The galaxy had peace after many dark years. But for Tarek Ven, peace did not come easily. He stood on the deck of a damaged observation ship orbiting the ashes of a once beautiful planet. The ground below was blackened. Cities turned into glass by fire. Yet among the ruins he saw something incredible. Humans rebuilding. Tiny lights flickered across the dark land. Human engineers had already begun working. They repaired shelters, brought food and water, and planted new life where everything had died. Tarek Ven could hardly understand it. The humans had lost more than any other species. Half of their fleet was gone. So many of their people would never return home. And still, they smiled as they worked. For Tarek Ven, that smile was more powerful than any weapon. When the war ended, the Galactic Union gathered to remember the fallen. Leaders from every world came to the central station of HFY. The air was filled with speeches and sorrow. The Sithari delegation, including Tarek Ven, sat silently while others spoke of loss and rebuilding. But when Commander Elena Torres took the stage, the whole hall fell silent. Her uniform was torn, her left arm wrapped in white cloth. Her face showed the pain of many battles, but her eyes, those same eyes Tarek Ven had once found strange, shone with quiet fire. She spoke not as a hero, but as a human. "We fought because we had to," she said in a calm voice. "We fought because we love our homes, our friends, and the life that fills these stars. The Dravkesh tried to take that from us, but love cannot be destroyed. It always grows back." Her words touched every heart in the hall. Even the most logical and emotionless species felt something stir within them. The speech ended with quiet applause, and for a long time, no one moved. Tarek Ven realized that the galaxy would never see humans the same way again. Later that night, Tarek Ven met Commander Torres in the station's garden dome. The artificial night sky shone above them. Plants from 100 worlds glowed softly around them. "You saw everything, didn't you?" she asked with a tired smile. Tarek Ven nodded. "Yes, and I still do not fully understand." "What don't you understand?" "Your strength," he said slowly. "Your species faced destruction. Yet even when you were losing, you fought harder. You acted with courage even when hope was gone." "Why?" Torres looked at the stars for a moment. Because someone has to stand up, she said quietly. When the universe turns dark, someone has to be the light. We can't wait for others to do it. So we do. Tarek Ven studied her face, searching for any sign of pride or anger. There was none. Only quiet determination, he asked. Do all humans feel this way? She smiled gently. Not all. But enough of us do. And that's what matters. The next morning, Tarek Ven prepared his final report for the Sithari High Council. It was the most important report of his life. He had studied many species, intelligent, strong, wise, but none like humanity. He wrote carefully, Humans are dangerous not because they wish to harm others, but because they refuse to surrender to fear. Their fury in battle comes not from hatred but from love. Their strength lies not in power but in hope. Even in destruction they build again. Even in grief they smile. I once believed they were reckless. Now I see they are alive in a way few others are. As he wrote, he remembered the faces he had seen. The laughing soldiers before battle, the medics helping alien wounded, the engineers rebuilding worlds that weren't even their own. He realized something deep. Humanity's greatest weapon was not their technology or strategy. It was their heart. Weeks later, Tarek Ven returned to his homeworld, Cytherian. His people welcomed him as a survivor of the Great War. Many came to hear his stories of the humans, for everyone had heard of their final stand at the Battle of Dawnfire. He told them what he had seen. Humans fight with their hearts. Their courage spreads to others like light in darkness. They remind us that fear is only strong when we allow it to be. Some of his people listened with wonder. Others doubted him. Surely they are too violent, one elder said. War changes all who fight. Tarek Ven nodded. Yes, it changed them. But it also changed me. I saw that their fury was not born of cruelty. It was born of care. Their will to survive came from their wish to protect. Humanity taught me that peace is not the absence of war. It is the presence of hope. For the first time in centuries, the Sithari Council paused to think about peace in a new way. Months passed. A monument was built on the neutral planet of Helion, a place where soldiers from all species could rest together. At the center of the monument stood a single sculpture, a human hand reaching upward holding a small light. Below it were the words carved in dozens of languages, for those who fought not for power but for the right to live. Tarek Ven visited the monument one quiet evening. He found a young Sithari child standing before it, staring at the glowing light in the statue's palm. Who were they? The child asked. Tarek Ven smiled softly. They are called humans, he said. They are new to the stars, yet their spirit burns brighter than most. Were they strong? Yes, Tarek Ven replied. But not because they had great weapons or strong bodies. They were strong because they refused to give up on each other. The child thought for a moment and whispered, I want to be like them. Tarek Ven looked at the statue, the light reflecting in his eyes. So do I, he said quietly. Years later, stories of humanity's courage spread through every star system. Some called them saviors. Others called them legends. But among the Sithari, they were known as the people of the flame. Whenever a new threat appeared, commanders across the galaxy remembered the humans. They remembered how they fought when all others had fallen. They remembered the fleet that refused to retreat, the voices that shouted through the static, for every world that burns. And in every heart, a spark of that same fire began to glow. Tarek Ven lived the rest of his days teaching young scholars about what he had seen. He often ended his lectures with the same words, the universe is vast and cold. But wherever humans go, they bring warmth. They remind us that life is not about avoiding pain. It is about rising above it. That is their true gift to us. On his final journey, Tarek Ven visited Earth itself. The planet was full of green fields and shining cities rebuilt after the war. He walked among humans, laughing children, busy workers, artists painting the sky. He felt peace. He realized that the humans were not just survivors. They were dreamers. They did not live to fight. They fought so they could live. Standing on a hill overlooking the city, he whispered to the wind, You changed me forever. And somewhere deep in the stars, that silent truth echoed through the galaxies. Humanity's fury was unimaginable, but their love was even greater.